And so they have to find other grounds. And it really is quite extraordinary the way that this takes place. According to John's Gospel, Pilate asks them, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And their initial reply is, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." What kind of accusation is that? The judge is saying, "What are you accusing this man of?" And they say, well, you know, if he hadn't done something wrong, we wouldn't have got him here. What kind of response is that? And then Luke tells us that clearly they go on to formulate things a bit better, and they say, "We found him perverting the nation." Well, that's still a pretty vague accusation. And then, "We found him perverting the nation, forbidding to pay taxes, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." I really wonder whether the Jews were not totally taken by surprise when Pilate demanded accusations. I wonder whether there had not been an agreement reached the previous night with Pilate, whereby the Jews did not expect to have to present a case in court, whereby they expected that Pilate was simply going to rubber stamp their decision. We know from the history of Pilate that he was by no means averse to having men executed without any formal trial or condemnation at all. And it strikes me that they have probably entered into an agreement with Pilate, an agreement which Pilate is now backtracking on for various reasons. Well, look at their accusations. Perverting the nation, that could mean anything. Forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar. Now that, of course, was just an outright lie. Only days before, that same week, in the temple, they had come to him and said, "Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" And Jesus had said, "Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." And you see, this accusation was utterly false. And here we have the chief priests, Caiaphas, the leaders of the Jewish nation, the elders of the people, the leading members of the Sanhedrin itself, and they are united together in this colossal lie. He forbids to pay taxes, saying that he is Christ, a king. Of course, that was true, but in the sense in which Jesus claimed to be the Christ, the king, that was no problem for the Roman state. My kingdom is not of this world. And yet, how many there are today who bring their own preconceptions to the Christian faith. You see, these men are bringing their preconceptions. When they say he forbids to pay taxes to Caesar, what they are doing is they are putting into Jesus' mouth what they think the true Messiah ought to be doing. Their concept of the Messiah is someone who will forbid to pay taxes to Caesar. And they are imputing to Jesus their own preconceptions. He is Christ, a king who is a danger, a threat to the Roman Empire. That's the kind of Messiah that they thought he ought to be if he were real. Well, how important it is not to bring our preconceptions to the Christian faith. Many think that they know what Christianity is all about, and yet their actual understanding of biblical teaching is minimal. How important it is, if we are serious about these things, to search the Scriptures to see what is truth. Well, In verse 3, we have Pilate's first question to Jesus. The question is exactly the same, his first question to Jesus, in all 4 Gospels. He says, "Are you the King of the Jews?" We must understand the emphasis here. He is not asking, "Are you the King of the Jews?" in the sense of, is what they say about you true? He is saying, "Are you the King of the Jews?" It seems that Pilate is simply astonished at what he sees before him. This man who is being brought, he is supposed to be perverting the nation, forbidding to pay taxes, a king who is a rebel against the government of Caesar. He is expecting some militant, some man bearing the scars of his crimes in his body to appear before him. And he is dumbfounded at the kind of man that he is faced with. Are you the man against whom they are bringing these charges? Well, it's evident that there is then a good deal more takes place, which is not recorded here. And in the following verse, Luke gives us the conclusion of the matter, because finally Pilate publicly announces, "I find no fault with this man." That is not simply a personal assertion that he thinks Jesus is a good man. That is actually couched in legal terminology. It is a formal verdict. "I find no fault with this man." It is a legal pronouncement, and in Pilate's intention, it is going to be the end of the matter. He has heard the case, he has pronounced a verdict, the prisoner is not guilty, and that is the end. But the Jews will not have it. They become the more fierce, saying he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. And they make a commotion. They protest, and it becomes obvious to Pilate that he has trouble on his hands. But when he hears that Jesus is from Galilee, then he sees a way to solve his problem. He need not condemn an innocent man. On the other hand, he can fob off the Jews by saying, okay, he's a Galilean. It is lawful for a man to be tried by the authority to whom he owes allegiance in his native place. And I can send him to Herod because Herod is here at the Passover in his own residence. And so Pilate takes the easy way out and he refers him to Herod. What we see here, of course, is gross injustice. Pilate clearly knew that Jesus was innocent of the accusations. He wanted to release Jesus. He had the authority to release Jesus. He had the moral obligation to release Jesus. But he does not do it. It's not because of any personal antipathy towards Jesus. It's not out of any favour towards the Jews. We know from the history of Pilate that he had no great love for the Jews, no great desire to please the Jews. It wasn't that. It was simply fear. He feared that if he went to